To the speaker or the microphone, Sam Edwards.
Copy of the Constitution. Ron's going to help me out. My fellow citizens, we are here today to celebrate the United States Constitution, and it is both fitting and proper that we should do that. Most of today's presentations will do exactly that. But it is impossible for us to do that without first pointing out that President Obama has been systematically eroding the very Constitution we came here to celebrate.
Here, can you?
Please allow me to point out several specific ways that he has been doing it. The most egregious has been Obamacare itself. This health care law and the way it is being implemented violates the Constitution in several areas. The worst being in interstate commerce. This was an unprecedented power grab. Despite the way it was reported in the mainstream media in July, to its credit, the Supreme Court struck that down. I'm not sure how many of you are aware that the Supreme Court actually said that under the interstate commerce clause, the federal government cannot force anybody to buy anything. Unfortunately, they took the fine and relabeled it as a tax, and they did uphold that portion of it. But they also ruled unconstitutional what Obamacare was doing to force the states to expand their Medicaid program. What has not been addressed yet is what's called the IPAB, the Individual Payment Advisory Board. This is an enormously powerful board that is in the process of being created, and once created, it will oversee the nation's entire healthcare system. IPAB decisions automatically become law. That means this is being ignored. Worse, to overturn an IPAB decision takes a 3/5 vote of the Senate. That means the IPAB is every bit as powerful as 60 senators. This amounts to an incredible transfer of power from elected representatives to an unelected bureaucracy. The Supreme Court has not yet ruled on the constitutionality of IPAB, but there is a lawsuit working its way through the courts, and they will eventually have to do that. Waivers to Obamacare. The administration has issued over 1,200 waivers to corporations on Obamacare. Think about that. That means the federal government has the power to go to this corporation and say, you have to follow the law. And to another one say, no, I think I'll let you not follow the law. Think about how much power that gives them. And they can issue the waivers for any reason they want to, although you don't need to worry about them issuing it based on campaign donations. I'm sure they won't do that. These waivers clearly violate the 14th Amendment's guarantee to equal protection under the law. Let's move on to illegal immigration. In many cases, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, has been ordered by the Obama administration not to enforce immigration law. They are there to enforce immigration law. Worse, they took the state of Arizona to court when Arizona said, okay, if you're not going to enforce them, we will. And they went into court with the argument saying that Arizona cannot enforce federal immigration laws because that's a federal government responsibility. This is the equivalent of the police department coming out to your house and saying, you cannot protect your home because that's a police department responsibility, while at the same time saying that we have no intention of protecting your home. It is mind-boggling. Article 2 of the Constitution requires that the President, quote, faithfully execute the laws. Let's talk about the DREAM Act. which is a modified amnesty for children of illegal aliens. Obama tried to get the DREAM Act passed by Congress, but it was voted down. So he implemented it anyway through an executive order, and he called it a policy change. That's a quote. A year ago, in 2011, Obama said he could not do that. He had to first have congressional authority. This year he says, yeah, he can do it without congressional authority. Unilaterally granting this amnesty violates Article 1, Section 7 of the U.S. Constitution. How about waivers to the No Child Left Behind Act? He's issued several of them. The problem is that act doesn't allow for waivers. As Dr. Thomas Sowell recently said, for Barack Obama to waive whatever provisions he doesn't like in a law undermines the fundamental nature of the American government. Recess appointments. Now, the Constitution does allow the president to make appointments when the Senate is not in session and get them through without Senate approval. But President Obama has made appointments to the National Labor Relations Board and the Consumer Finance Protection Board while the Senate was in pro forma session. The administration's argument is that the president has the power to decide whether the Senate is in session. The Constitution says that the Congress and the president are co-equal branches. So Obama's argument places him above the Congress, which violates Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. How about use of the military? The Constitution says that only Congress can declare war. Now, Congress did pass the War Powers Act, which allows the president to act in a national emergency without congressional approval. But the action he took in sending the armed forces into Libya, that doesn't qualify. The action in Libya was to take out Gaddafi, but he was not a direct threat to our national security. There was no serious argument for that. When the Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, was recently asked if the administration might do the same thing in Syria, Panetta said that they would only do it after they first sought approval from an international agency such as the UN or NATO. In a follow-up question, Panetta was asked, what about seeking permission from the Congress? And Panetta answered, quote, we might. We might follow the Constitution. I guess it depends on what side of the bed they get up that day. Obama is saying that international agencies are more important than having Congress. Obama's use of military force in Libya violated Articles 1 and 2 of the Constitution, as well as the War Powers Act. Let's talk about the Chrysler bailout. In this case, the Obama administration forced secured creditors to accept less money, 30 cents on the dollar, while transferring that extra money to the secondary creditors. Who were the secondary creditors? The union. Obama was rewarding his union buddies for all the help they provided him in the 2008 election. His actions violated the Constitution's taking a due process clause, which is part of the Fifth Amendment, as well as the nation's bankruptcy law. Lastly, I'll mention the Dodd-Frank legislation. This new law invests massive, unaccountable powers in the federal government. Under the law, the Treasury Department can seize banks and financial institutions deemed unsound but too big to fail. The decision of the Treasury Department to do this is not reviewable by anybody. Think about that. The Treasury Department can come in and seize huge amounts of assets with no review from anybody else. Do you see the pattern in all of this? The Obama administration consistently transfers power from elected officials to unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. The president believes that he can just get past all this messy constitutional democracy stuff, that he can create a heaven right here on earth. And he has said plainly that, quote, when the Congress fails to act, we will. And if Obama is reelected, he knows that he no longer need worry about the voters. As Dr. Sowell said recently, quote, When a president can ignore the plain language of duly passed laws and substitute his own executive orders, then we no longer have a government of laws and not of men, but a president ruling by decree, just like a dictator in some banana republic. Well, we need to send, we the people, need to send a clear message to this president, right there, and any future presidents, that when the Congress fails to act, you can't.
Amen.
And we need to tell the Congress, thank you, we need to tell the Congress when they do act, they have to do it in accordance with this entire document. Thank you. Not like that, but we can put it back. Now, we are doing trivia questions today at the end of each presentation, and a winner gets a prize. And the question that I have here is a trick question. Who was the first president? I'm not asking about Washington. Who was the first president to assume the office without any constitutional authority to do so? Show of hands. Anybody have an idea? It's a real tough one. Anybody know?
John Hanson.
Who?
John Hanson.
John who?
Hanson, H-A-N-S-O-N.
No, that's not right. It's close, though. You get the first name correct.
I know he was a president.
It was an actual
Anybody else want to try it?
I know it wasn't Alexander Haig.
No? Okay. The correct answer, this surprised me, is John Tyler, who was the first vice president to assume the responsibility of president upon the death of William Henry Harrison in 1841. At that time, believe it or not, there was nothing in the Constitution that provided for the vice president to actually become the president. Article 2, Section 6 of the Constitution states that, quote, in the case of the removal of the president from office, or of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of the said office, the same shall devolve on the vice president, end quote. The article did not state that the vice president actually became the president. It just said that he assumed the duties of the president. President Tyler immediately began to refer to himself as president with no actual congressional authority to do so, and every succeeding vice president in the same position did the same. It was not until the 25th Amendment was passed in 1967 that the vice president became, by verbiage of the Constitution, the new president. This amendment legitimized Tyler's unconstitutional position. Does that mean I get to keep the